Okay, so tonight my brief is to say something about spiritual receptivity. So I guess a way of beginning is suggesting that receptivity is a bit like the windows and doors in a house. The house of our identity, it really only becomes fruitful if it has doors and windows. So without them, the house of our body and the house of views is in some way not different to inhabiting a prison. Oh, so looks as if somebody wants to come in. So, so without this, without the doors and windows, we may feel that our body is not different to a prison. We may feel a sense of being bound within it, bound within our views. Or alternatively, we might feel ourselves in some way outside of our body. So a house without doors and windows from the outside, it feels as if it's an inaccessible space, something very distinct from our sensations and the space in which they arise. So receptivity, this spiritual receptivity, is really the means to exist fruitfully between our inner and our outer life, to look out and to look in. And the windows of spiritual receptivity help us to see beyond our limiting views. They bring light into our being. So the term spiritual receptivity, what it really describes is the process through which our body, and particularly the heart-mind associated with it, opens and begins to soften this illusory boundary between self and world, so that it becomes capable of really receiving sensation, image, and narrative with an attitude of open-handed curiosity. So receptivity engages with experience through inquiry, rather than any attempt to filter or control or pass judgment on our experience. So it's a way of seeing, of knowing, in which anything might reveal itself and possibly become animated into meaning, however ungraspable that meaning may be. So receptivity is something about the sense of wonder at this abundance of potential significance, and yet something about an unfolding nature of even the smallest event, the smallest exchange between us, the most subtlest of sensation is always opening and revealing more of itself. So you could describe spiritual receptivity as equivalent to a poetic sensibility that gives rise to a sense of augmentation and the building of resonances and connections through simply giving kind, curious, non-judgmental attention to our bare experience. So just to paraphrase James Hillman. So from the perspective of the receptive, everything reverberates with under and overtones. This metaphorical perspective brings about the death of naive realism and literal understanding. The receptive mode doesn't speak to us in declarative statements or explain in clear contrasts. It delivers all things to their shadows. So why is spiritual receptivity so important within this system of practice, which I think you've been exploring. Why is receptivity so pivotal? I think one of the things is that it's really trying to serve our human life by attending and bringing curiosity to what's unfolding right here, rather than trying to control or direct or transform or transcend. There's a presumption within receptivity that what we seek or long for is always here, at least in potential. So we don't need to create anything new. We don't have to develop anything. We simply become sensitive to that which is always here and always emerging between us, amongst us, and within our inner life. We could perhaps say that receptivity balances out the active, the doing mode of practice and encourages faith in receiving our actual experience in its fullness. And out of this fullness, we can live without, we live minimizing any risks of alienation, nihilism, and spiritual bypassing. These may arise if we too forcibly try to build a preconceived notion of what it is to live a spiritual life. So I'm just going to share an image now with you, a simple image. Hopefully I can get it up on the screen. So what we have here is really, why are we bringing receptivity? What are we doing with receptivity? So the suggestion is that Buddhism isn't just about the Buddha, as I say below. It's about to try to live fruitfully in this gap between what we experience as ourselves, what we describe as me, I, you, and at the other end of this pole we have what we describe as the Buddha, or liberation, an end to suffering. These different images of the goal of Buddhist practice. So the gap is really, as we're probably hopefully familiar with, this is where the whole of the spiritual life takes place. And these two modes of the receptive and the active are both vital for really working with this gap. But maybe because of my own bias, my own sense is that actually receptivity is key to really exploring and opening into this mystery of this gap between our sense of self and liberation. So what we have is the five aspects of our system of practice. So you're probably familiar with this as an image, and you will see that I've placed receptivity at the heart of this diagram. So I'm just going to say a little bit about, as a way of kind of entering into the territory a bit more fully, I'm just going to say a bit about these different qualities of integration, positive emotion, etc., in relation to receptivity. So I'm going to first look at receptivity in relation to integration. So integration is this process of becoming receptive to the structures of our being. So, of course, we've already looked at tonight this sense of really knowing our breathing body, and through that, how within it, we're carrying views, we're carrying our history, our culture, our longings, our passions, and of course, these never-ending mental activity arising out of our views. So receptivity really uncovers and gathers into consciousness. It welcomes in all that we are as this foundation and the territory out of which we practice. It creates a sense of the shape, the style of our home, those period features that we may find within us. It creates a sense of the shape, the style, and those parts of the house which may be even uninhabited. So integration recognizes fully the house that we inhabit. And moving through our system of practice, we have receptivity to positive emotion. So we could say that positive emotion is a bit like, in relation to receptivity, it's like tending the hearth, recognizing what it is, what fuels the flames of our positive emotion, what ignites us and what dampens us down. And this sense of, through receptivity, we can really come to rest by the hearth and receive these blessings of the fire. We can listen to stories, and we can simply sit with each other in the surrounding darkness and receive this stability, the life and security, faith in this hearth within us. So spiritual receptivity itself, I picture this, I've mentioned this sense of doors and windows. So receptivity is that which allows in light, allowing us to see more clearly the room that we are inhabiting, the space we're inhabiting. But it also allows us to look out onto the world, look out beyond ourselves, and carry us towards spiritual death. So spiritual death, just to mention briefly, so with this light of receptivity, we can see maybe the sedimentary nature of the rocks that have been fashioned into our own walls and floors and roof, and see they're not different to that which forms the valleys, the hills and the houses all around us. We can see the water running through the town and the droplets of rain, and know that the moisture in our mouth is no different. To know that the me and mine of this house is fleeting, ephemeral, here, and always in transition, which leads us to rebirth, spiritual rebirth in relation to receptivity. So by looking out into the world, out into the town, into the forests, we see the sedimentary rock all around us. We see other cottages, sheds, palaces and churches and prisons, each building with its unique collection of doors and windows. This is the community that we are utterly woven into. And we recognize that in each building, in each other, there is a hearth. And we can see within this town, this city, this community, there are paths between the houses. There may be grand avenues or hidden pilgrim routes, and above it all, clear blue sky, and below the nourishing earth. How completely interwoven we are in our sufferings and our longings. So I hope that just gives some introduction to, well, I suppose it's the context really of this spiritual receptivity. So I'm aware that actually I've been invited tonight to talk about receptivity in daily life. So I better get on to that. So so the art of receptivity in daily life. So for me, it's establishing and developing a quality of attention that is broad enough so that although it's centered in arising sensations and appearances within the body and the breath, it's sufficiently broad and fluid enough to be able to hold attention on this inner world whilst wholeheartedly engaging with, responding to and receiving this abundant, apparently outer world of appearance. And it's being able to bring receptivity simultaneously to the inner and outer world that fosters receptivity in daily life. So I'm just going to share another image with you. So this is one of my favorite symbols. So any excuse in a talk to talk about the Bhadra, I'll get it in there. So I'll just point you to this, this image. Hopefully you are familiar with it. But I think one of the reasons it's so beautiful is it really gives a sense of this complete interweaving between inner and outer experiences. This division that we kind of split experience into self and other. I'm not going to say too much about it, actually. I think I'll just go straight on to the next image, which will bring it into context. So this is the symbol, but below it is the reason why I'm bringing it into this discussion. So this is quite a full image, but I hope it's sufficient to just give you a sense of what I think, why receptivity is so important for the spiritual life. I think what receptivity really does is it starts to break down this sense of self and other by opening more into what I'm describing as the relational field. We can start to see so I'm trying to do two things here. I'm trying to look at my notes and go with the image. So I'm just going to return to my notes, otherwise I'm going to miss out chunks of what I want to say this evening. So let's just hold the image there and we'll come back, or that can just sit there whilst I talk about this receptivity in daily life. So receptivity is, as I've said, it's based in, and as we've been experiencing earlier, it's based in the body and the breath, but it's sufficiently broad and fluid to be able to hold attention on the inner life, but also whilst we engage and respond and receive the apparent other, the outer world. But this process is inherently relational, because we can really heighten our sensitivity to what happens as one part meets another part of our internal experience. We can really notice to the extent that we become completely absorbed by or preoccupied with some aspect of our inner experience, and thereby lose contact to the outer world. And conversely, just as easily, we can become so absorbed, drawn into the outer life, that we lose touch with our inner experience. So when we find ourselves at either pole, we have this opportunity to broaden our attention and create space by consciously relaxing and broadening to include what has got lost. So the spiritual receptivity is constantly checking and opening this relational field between our inner and outer life, and trying to include them both in our attention. And in this way, we can really begin to free ourselves from fixed views about how we are, how others are, and really start to explore this sense of the interplay between inner and outer. We become more receptive to recognizing that those places where we grip and those places where we relax and open. So Blake refers to this simple thing of bifocal awareness, this sense of recognizing the outer world whilst also being very attentive to our inner experience. And so this bifocal awareness of the inner and outer really helps us deepen into our receptivity for our daily life. And when we begin to attend to all that is arising from this point of balance at the heart of the Bhadra, more becomes visible. We can begin to catch the resonances. We can really notice that the beautiful mystery of synchronicity, that when we are tuned to our inner and outer life simultaneously, we can give rise to this sense of that everything around us becomes meaningful and significant. There's a richness to experience when we're able to really be with both poles simultaneously. We can move or attend to both inner and outer without necessarily being solely located in either pole. We can do this because with spiritual receptivity, nothing is banished, nothing is clung to. So everything that arises can be attended to, noticed, and just allowed to be. And the basis of this choiceless awareness is faith in the principle that in this fluid living space, which we tend to separate into self and world, or self and other, nothing arises that doesn't have the potential to unfold into meaning and significance. So the receptive dance of awareness arising between self and other is naturally liberating. Spiritual receptivity is naturally liberating. That is, it has its own momentum, its own integrity, which supports us into a softening or a picking up of that which has been lost, and leads us quite naturally towards a gradual liberation. So a little stanza. Desiring to take over all under heaven and manage it, this I see will not succeed. All under heaven is a sacred vessel. It must not be managed. Managing only leads to harm. Control always brings loss. So I do recognize it can be difficult to sustain faith in spiritual receptivity if we already have a view about how the next moment should be or could be. So I say this out of a sadness for myself that acknowledges to the extent in which my own life I've so often overridden or distrusted this natural source of knowing, this natural source of guidance which resides in spiritual receptivity. And I'm imagining I'm not alone in this, that so many of us seem to suppress or override our intuitive understanding, our actual body sensations, our emotional responses, so that I can fit in how I've already decided I should be, I have to be, or others have to be. So it seems to be really important to be in touch with the vividness and this simple clarity that arises out of simply being open, wholly present to oneself and simultaneously in relation to the world. And this is the challenge of spiritual receptivity, because it reveals the extent which we are filtering our own experience to confirm our views. So we're filtering experience, and this is really limiting our meeting and our engagement with what's actually here, what's actually present, and makes it really difficult to fully meet each other without some sort of subtle or not so subtle agenda. And this basic mistrust of receptivity may be leading us to be trying to predetermine or limit our relationship with ourselves and with each other. By exploring this boundary of our spiritual receptivity, it may begin to reveal the stories that we are carrying, the stories that we are using to define and evaluate our ongoing experience, particularly how we, others, and the world should be or already are. And the more we can really open to notice these judgments, these fantasies and wishes, the more that we can gives us the opportunity to explore what lays behind them at the edges of these strong conditioned and conditioning experiences. Unfortunately, these shoulds of how things should be often become most prominent and disruptive when we get involved with a spiritual tradition, or if we are engaged in any creative process. Hence this centrality of spiritual receptivity to ensure that our life unfolds fully without limitation. So, in my experience, many people set out on a quest because they are being called by something within them which perhaps isn't fully formed, fully conscious, fully visible to them. But that half-formed longing that can quickly concretize into a view. So, as a simple example, let's suggest that someone has been drawn to meditation. And it's really easy to rationalize that call through linking it to something that we've read about meditation. Maybe as a simple example, We may have read that if we meditate, we're going to, that's going to give rise to feelings of calm and relaxation. But hopefully we all have seen this, experienced this. What do we do? What happens if, as we begin to open to ourselves in meditation, that we find we're not becoming calm or relaxed? If there's this desire to acquire calm and relaxation in the same way that we may acquire a new item of clothing, something that we put over our actual experience, then we're really limiting the potential fruits of meditation. It leads us inevitably to evaluate our actual experience as being wrong or bad if we don't find ourselves in calm and relaxed states. And this is a bit like trying to demand grace or trying to work a painting where we already know what the end result is going to look like. So if we really, if this happens to be how we're operating, we never really fully enter the mystery of spiritual receptivity, of creativity, of open awareness. We can learn certain skills in meditation, maybe achieve a degree of calm, but the ongoing journey of the receptive works against any preconceived outcome. And it's always entering into mystery, always entering into the unknown. So spiritual receptivity, it's not blind to agendas, but it's always looking to the edges, the beneath, the beyond. So it lessens the possibility of becoming ensnared within any limited view. So spiritual receptivity is the key, the primary means through which liberation becomes possible and embodied. So let's just finish with a poem from Rumi. Very familiar one, but appropriate, I think, for this context. It's called The Guest House. So this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honourably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So we have space now to, well, maybe before we go into groups, we've got a bit of time. If you like, I'm very happy if there's any immediate questions that you may have around what I've just spoken about. If you want to ask anything about that before we go into discussion groups, just to, well, it doesn't have to be questions, it can be observations around what I've been talking about this evening and this theme of spiritual receptivity.
I really loved how you started the meditation with us just having our tea, and I had to go down and get the tea. But I realized how normally I would just think, oh, must get the tea and then get upstairs. And I just stopped and kind of opened out to making the tea being the meditation and going upstairs being the meditation. And what I found really interesting was that when we did go into the meditation, it took me like halfway through the meditation to realize that I had my eyes open. You know, like it didn't seem, you normally it's a thing to have my eyes open, are they shut? And so it's like a special kind of state or something. I didn't even realize that I had them open. And I thought that was something about how we'd started in such an open, inclusive kind of way, if you see what.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, great. That's a lovely observation, and yeah, great to hear. I have to say I was slightly anxious because I realized I kind of dropped you into this open space without any guidance. I thought, oh God, is that all right? I'm not sure about this, but there you are. That's my stuff.
Well, I loved it. So
good.
I loved the imagery of the house as, you know, the receptive nature and of inward and outward experience at the beginning that you used, and how you ended with the roomy house, the guest house, and opening the door to all those states and creatures and beings. And yeah, I think it's a really good symbol for our minds and ourselves, actually. And it's something that often occurs to me in dreams, actually, different kinds of buildings and houses, and somehow or other how they're being used in those sort of dream states seem to really illustrate something of what you were talking about.
Right. Thanks, Cameron. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm always surprised when I'm in a dream and I think, I know this space. I know if I go down that corridor there, I'll get to that bit and I can go through there and come out. It's just fascinating that there is actually an architectural space to our inner experience, which I find, yeah, really fascinating. So, yeah. And
what I find particularly helpful, Bhadra, thank you so much for your talk, is this notion of windows and doors, and how actually, yeah, the image that comes to my mind with my views of things, I'm actually breaking up, or I have, bricked up the windows, and I'm totally imprisoned. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's a bit painful to hear, but I guess it's helpful to know the nature of our house, isn't it? So, and hopefully there's some indication there of the imagery or the indication around the potential, I guess, of spiritual receptivity, of really turning towards, well, I guess it is that kind of the act of consciously opening the windows to see what's around, in and out. But yeah, great.
Hi. I wanted to say that this reminded me of something somebody once said. He said it's just 2 words, just observe. And that was the teaching, just observe. And I thought, yeah, it's that thing about when you really pay attention to what's going on, something shifts, but without you trying. And it's that, rather than making something happen, there's that, the more awareness I have of what's happening, the more acceptance, things naturally, it's like that sense of things want to heal themselves or something, but it's the natural process. And I find that quite fascinating. So that just reminded me of that, really. Just an allowing.
Yeah. I think partly it's everything wants to be known and seen, particularly in around the body sensations. You know, if we have strong internal experiences, they're calling us. They're calling for attention. It's like our children, our kids, you know, when they need a bit of attention, they start making a lot of noise. And I think it's the same with, you know, inner or outer experience. That it's just sort of calls to us, really. So it's, yeah, to actually sort of engage with that, see what's being, wants attention. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, it's like the body doesn't lie.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David, you were going to say something? Thanks, Amanda.
I was going to ask a kind of obvious question, but I think just as you're talking about, you know, the receptivity, it feels very freewheeling. That you can find just what is there in the moment and go with that, if you're open to it. But you know, you have kids, you know what it's like. That, you know, how do you balance that with having to plan a life? The idea that you have a preconceived idea of what the future would be. Having a plan is a preconceived idea. I must get the kids dressed and off to school, kind of thing. But how does that get balanced?
Well, I think fortunately we have these different poles of spiritual practice. So I think there is something about maintaining some continuity of awareness, which is an important part of receptivity. So I think I would say that, yeah, we do have these tasks to perform, but they tend to, in my experience, they tend to work, they seem to flow more easily if we are grounded in this spiritual receptivity. So yes, we've got to get the kids ready for school, but actually if we try to force that as onto the kids, and you know, I don't know, they've lost their school bag or something quite simple, you know, just oh, you've lost your school bag, so I don't need to push you out the door. I can actually just do something effective to meet that. So I think it's I suppose for me, I feel that the receptivity is still the ground out of which activity arises, and it just gives us greater flexibility and perceptiveness within a situation. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, it's a theory. It's a good theory, isn't it? Especially with kids. But I think more generally, no, I do trust that. I think, yeah.
It's having more of a flexible plan than a rigid one.
Yes, I mean, I think wherever we meeting rigidity is inevitably going to lead to suffering. So spiritual receptivity is very much about that fluidity and availability, which tends to, continually soften and release us out of any grip. But yeah, it's part of practice, the important part of practice, I think. But I don't want to say, yeah, just sit on your chair all day and do nothing. It's not really quite like that. I mean, it's more like sit on your chair and then move out of that space with that presence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So where it's 20 past, maybe it's time to I'll pass back. I need to pass it back to you, Naga Bodhi, is that correct?